Welcome to MMA Main, the best MMA show around the world. My name's Mighty. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. All right, well, let's just jump right into it. We had the twofer this past weekend. We had Bellator on Friday, and we had UFC on Saturday in Brazil. Bellator, actually a pretty impressive card. I liked it. There was 2 title fights. Co-main and main event were title fights. Ill Will Brooks defended his title against a very dangerous jiu-jitsu guy. Man, I was getting scared. His name's Marcin Held. I can never pronounce names properly, so I need to work on that. But anyways, Mr. Held was trying to hold his leg. I was cringing at some point because, you know, it's one thing to get a submission like a rear naked choke or a guillotine, but anything that has to do with like breaking a limb always gets me on edge, especially when it comes to a knee or something like that. So he's trying to go for like a knee bar. Heel hook, not quite as bad, but knee bars, arm bars, man, there's it, or Kimura trying to break the shoulder or whatnot. So anyways, Ill Will, you know, he basically gets through all 5 rounds, remains champion, so kudos to him. I guess he did pop his knee in the first or second round, but he managed to go through it. It was quite interesting to see that he kept taking Held down and going to his game where he wanted to be. So, hey, but it worked out, and he got to keep the title. Daniel Strauss, man, against Pitbull, Patricio Pitbull. This was their 3rd meeting, and it went almost just like the second fight. Daniel Strauss coming out, banging, pretty much dominating the fight. And then the 5th round, he gives up his back, almost gets choked. I was freaked out. I thought, man, how can you do this? It's going to be like the same fight last time. Yeah, but my hat's off to him. He hung in there. He actually broke his left hand, and I believe it was the first round, and there's an x-ray online. You can see it. I mean, the bone is just, you know, it's not good. So for him to stay in there and go all 5 rounds and become victorious, good job, my friend. So anyways, that was Bellator. UFC in Brazil, interesting card. Man, Hendo, you know, there's nothing more to prove. You've done it all. You've seen it all. The same kick that took him out the last time these two fought, which is Dan Henderson against Vitor Belfort, by the way, was almost the same exact kick this time. I thought TRT would play a big part on whether or not Vitor would be able to perform or not. But obviously, Vitor looked good. I mean, obviously, he's not packing on that big mass that he used to, all ripped up and cut. He still looks healthy, obviously. He's a little skinnier, but he still looks in shape. He's been fighting a long time, though. I think, though, outside of Chris Weidman and John Jones, he can still kind of hang with the best of them. So let's see that rematch with Luke Rockhold. That's what I'd like to see. We have to see, obviously, what happens with Luke Rockhold when he fights Weidman next month, December. Is it December? No. Yeah, it is December on the Jose Aldo versus Conor McGregor card. That's when they'll meet up. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, if Luke Rockhold beats Weidman and becomes champion, Vitor's not going to jump right into that fight. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But who knows? You never know. You never know with MMA math what's going to happen. But overall, Brazilian card, solid. I liked it. Almeida is a beast. You know, he put Anthony Burchik on his back, and in glorious fashion, people are calling him out. I see John Dodson wants to fight him now. That would actually be an interesting matchup. He said he'll move up to bantamweight and fight him. Hell, why not? I would like to see that fight. John Lineker was another name that got mentioned against Almeida. So there are some interesting and exciting matchups to see Almeida up against a couple of these guys. So we'll see what happens with him. And other than that, the card was entertaining. I read that Bellator just edged UFC as far as views went. They're both free fights, but, you know, Bellator had the edge as far as, the title fights. Name recognition, I don't know. I guess it depends on how much you follow MMA. There's, Ill Will Brooks is big in Bellator and in the MMA world, and so is Daniel Strauss, Patricio, big name. So there wasn't a lot of big names on the UFC Brazil card. I mean, obviously you had Vitor and Hendo. Those were the biggest names. So in any case, let's move on to news and rumors. I guess one of the big things this week is Cro Cop, just a couple days ago, kind of said, hey, I'm going to hang it up due to an injury. He was actually scheduled to fight Anthony Hamilton coming up in Seoul, Korea. But another shoulder injury said, he has to pull out of the fight. So he just said, hey, I'm just going to hang it up. I can't do this anymore. My body's banged up. Granted, he's been fighting a long time, many fights in Pride, along with 2 different stints in the UFC. But to add insult to injury, literally, the first round of the USADA drug testing came back, and Cro Cop came up as a red flag. So it looks like he's going to get suspended. Even if he decides to retire, he's getting suspended regardless. So let's just, throw a little dirt in your face while you're on the ground injured with a shoulder injury. But hey, if you're doing the crime, you got to do the time. You know what I'm saying? So, it happens. I hate to see it. They wouldn't release exactly what drug came up in his system, so who knows what it is. If it's marijuana, then Twitter will be on fire. I don't know. I have no idea what it is. I have no idea. So don't go there. Don't do that. I'm sorry. It's probably Flintstone vitamins or something. All right, well, let's move forward to this weekend. We have the 2-for once again. Friday night, we have Legacy 48, free on Access TV. If you have Access TV, it's free. In any case, though, some free fights. You get to see some up-and-comers, people that you might see segue to different promotions later. So the smaller promotions, they're the ones that groom up-and-coming fighters or where retired fighters go to. In any case, check that out. Free on Access TV Friday. Saturday, long and behold, UFC 193 in Australia, the Down Under. So, there are many fights on this fight card I want to talk about. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but there are definitely some fights that I would like to talk about. Stefan Struve coming back. He's fighting Jared Rosholt. Interesting matchup. I'm not going to get too entailed with that. But Stefan Struve says he feels better than he ever has since he's been fighting. So, that's interesting because he's actually had some pretty decent fights. He's a pretty well-rounded guy, pretty talented. I'm interested to see what's going to happen. Jared's never fought anyone like this as far as like height and reach, but there really isn't too many people in the UFC with that height and reach, if any at all. Well, John Jones has a similar reach, but not the same height. In any case, that'll be an interesting matchup and see where these people land after the victor is announced. Uriah Hall and Robert Whittaker, they're going to be going up against each other. This is going to be an exciting fight, I feel. Both are strikers. It has the right on the wall to be fight of the night, potentially, but we'll see what happens. I have to give the edge to Hall in this just for the simple fact, I think he's finally coming around. He had all this potential. I won't say potential. He had all this hype around him on The Ultimate Fighter. Not to say that it wasn't justifiable because he's a very exciting fighter as far as what we saw in The Ultimate Fighter when he was on there. But when he came in, maybe the UFC nerve bug got to him. He just couldn't quite pull the trigger and perform to what we thought would be his potential. But these last 2 fights, both stoppages, I want to see him continue on this because he's an exciting fighter. He's very flashy, has some cool kicks. Whittaker, same thing. He's a very good striker too. Pretty dynamic. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Whittaker relies more on his hands. Hall relies more on his legs. So, leg advantage, distance, as Joe Rogan always says, no one puts that into consideration when it comes to stats. So leg distance for reach, that's going to be a big part of this game, I think. So I would have to give the edge to Hall. I think he's going to come up victorious. We'll have to see what happens, though. All right, next on the list, Bigfoot Silva versus Mark Hunt. The last time these 2 big boys met up with each other, it was a draw. And arguably one of the best fights we ever got to see in MMA history. These guys beat the holy hell out of each other. It's going to be a different fight this time, and I'll tell you why. No TRT. Bigfoot Silva, I know he just beat Soa, but, Soa is not a top 5, even a top 10 fighter. I think he might have made the top 15 at one point. But in any case, Mark Hunt goes in there, and he has one MO, and that's to knock your head off. So Mark Hunt's going to be the same Mark Hunt. Bigfoot Silva, I don't think he's... I know I said this about Vitor, but I really believe this about Bigfoot. He has a lot of different ailments. He has to take medication just to maintain the stuff that he has going on with the big itis, something or other. I don't know. Flying Brian, help me out here. You're the one that always knows this stuff about what he does. Anyways, TRT out of the loop, unless he's trying to, dope illegally. I think that, and I'm not saying he is, I'm just saying if he tries to, then I just think TRT not having that for him is going to play a big part. Mark Hunt's just going to come in and he's just going to impose his will and use those big power punches and knock him out. That's how I see this fight going, and I think it's going to be early. I think this might be a first-round KO. I know that's completely different from what we saw last time, but this is 2 years later, and I think Father Time was way more generous to Mark than it has been to Bigfoot, primarily because of the TRT. So we'll see what happens on that. Let's move into the co-main event now. We got Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Valerie L. I could barely pronounce Joanna's name, which I probably didn't do a very good job. And I sure as hell can't pronounce Valerie's last name. I probably could if someone told me, but I don't remember. We're just calling Valerie L. She's French-Canadian. I never took French, and I can barely speak English. So let's just leave it at that. Anyways, these two will meet each other for the co-main event. And this is a somewhat interesting matchup. I will say, Valerie... She does have a ground, well, I don't want to say she has a ground game, but she does have a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, but she only has one victory via submission. And actually, most of her wins are by decision, and all of her wins in the UFC are by decision. So, I think Joanna's just come in here and impose her will. She's like the mini Chuck Liddell as far as coming in. Her victories prior to these last two, where back and forth as far as like stoppage and decisions. I think it was about an even mix. But, a lot of people said that Carla Esparza would be reigning champion for a long time, and she came in and destroyed her. And ever since that fight, and then she fought Jessica Penne, she's been looking like this beast. And I think getting that strap around her waist has just lit that fire just nonstop. It's like a blazing inferno. So I honestly expect Joanna to come in and just light this up. I'm hoping it's a good fight. I'm hoping Valerie makes it competitive. We'll have to wait and see. I have to give the edge to Joanna on this. I don't want to rule Valerie out. I don't think it's a lopsided fight as much as maybe the main event, and we'll get to that in a second. But I do see Joanna retaining the championship belt, probably by TKO. All right, let's get into the main event. We have challenger Holly Holm against champion Ronda Rousey. Both undefeated fighters. Someone will go home with a loss. Who's it going to be? I'm pretty sure most people know who it's going to be. There's always that chance of the upset. But let's talk about the challenger for a second. Holly Holm. Here we go. Undefeated MMA. Okay, that's legit. That's hard to do. No matter who you are, that's hard to do. 2-0 in the UFC. Both fights, though, went to a decision. So her performances were, they weren't very impressive. One of those two decisions was a split decision, and that was against Raquel Pennington, a.k.a. Rocky. It was a tough fight for her. So you're going to tell me now that you're going to be able to go in and try to squeeze out a decision against Ronda Rousey? I don't think so. Let's talk about her boxing, though. 33-2, I believe her boxing record is, something around that. But I will tell you this, over half of her fights went to the decision. You know what that means? That's a lot of miles on a body. You're talking... I think it was like 17 or 18 fights went to decision. You're talking 10 rounds, 3 minutes a round. That's a lot of time in the ring. That takes a toll on you. Just ask some of these guys like Muhammad Ali and Larry Holmes and George Foreman. That stuff takes a toll on you. If you get quick knockouts, not as hard on the body as going the distance, especially in a continuous fashion. So put that into the configuration. And Ronda Rousey is younger than Holly Holm. Holly Holm is, I think, at least 5 years older than her. I want to say she's 32 or 33, and Ronda's 28. So you got 4 to 5 years difference, along with all those extra miles on there. I don't see how Holly Holm beats Ronda. Okay, decorated boxer. We've seen this before. Boxers come in like lights out Tony when he fought Randy Couture. It's a whole different game. Okay, granted, she's been in MMA now. She's fought 9 times. All right, I get that. But not against Ronda Rousey. She is just, I can't say enough. Okay, put me on the bandwagon, give me the pom-poms and I'll be a cheerleader, whatever. But Ronda Rousey is a beast. And even if she does finish it in the first round, which was always that high possibility, I don't care. I will pay for this pay-per-view. Just like I used to back in the day and watch fights with my pops and see Mike Tyson fight. Because we knew there was a good chance he was going to finish the fight in the first round. But guess what? We bought those pay-per-views anyway because we wanted to be a part of it and to see history in the making. Mike Tyson was a beast back in the day. I know towards the end of his career wasn't the same. But Ronda Rousey, she's still at the prime of her career. And I just don't see the upset happening. Not to say there isn't someone out there that's being groomed or being brought up to beat her. There's always that possibility. But right now, I don't see it happening. So I'm going to go with Ronda. And honestly, I think she'll knock her out. I think she wants to make a statement and really show, okay, I'm going to go against a decorated boxer and I'm going to knock her out and just put more fear into the rest of the division. Not that I don't see how much more can be put in there, but we'll see what happens. So in any case, that's what we have coming up this weekend. UFC 193 Saturday. Technically, it's Sunday in Australia. But thank you so much for watching me every week. The jackwagon or jackass that I am. You pick it. I'm both. Doesn't matter. Have a great day, night, morning, whatever you're doing right now. See you next week. Peace out.